There's a first century letter from an older man to a younger man, giving him advice on how to live out what was initially called the way, but we now call Christianity. The older man, Paul, is writing to the younger man, Timothy, to help him figure out a few things. Timothy has been mentored well by Paul. They used to wander around the globe together, talking with each other, talking to people about Jesus and setting up groups of Christians all over the place. And now Timothy has stopped the following of Paul, and he's a young man looking after a new community of believers, many of whom are older than Timothy. Interestingly, what Paul doesn't send to him is a list of instructions on how to run services, or doesn't send him like sample prayers or resources to use. He doesn't send him courses to run or programs to follow. He talks to Timothy about his character and his calling. Who is Timothy meant to be as a young leader following in the footsteps of Jesus? What is it that God's asking Timothy to do? That is where Paul focuses his time. And here's how he speaks to him. Near the end of his letter, Paul's already encouraged Timothy not to let others look down on him because of his youth, but instead he says, Timothy, you be the example in everything, in your life, your love, your faith, your speech, and your purity. He's encouraging him to remember the things that he felt God gave him as a calling and as his gifts. He's encouraging him to keep his head in the scriptures. But then Paul warns him of a couple of things. He says, don't get your head all confused by focusing on things that can so easily distract you. He calls out one of the biggest traps as being the love of money. He doesn't say money is evil in itself. He says, loving the things that money can bring you is a root cause of all kinds of things that go wrong. He calls out other things in the letter as well. He says, make sure your heart stays pure, Make sure you're not driven by the chemical urges and the animal instincts which lead to heartbreak and corruption all the time. There are pure and holy ways to do relationships that promote worth and dignity and love and hope and wholeness. And then there are impure, unholy ways to do relationships which just degrade and break and divide and weaken. This is the fight. This are our hearts inside us, our heads inside us. This is the fight that we need to be fighting against the things that take us away from how we know we should live. We need to fight for the things that we know bring us closer to how we should be with God. We've got to fight for people. Here's what Paul says to Timothy. He says, you need to run from all that stuff. Instead, chase after, fight for right living. Fight for godliness. Fight for faith and love and endurance and gentleness. We've got to fight for this stuff, he said. This is the good fight. Not the kind of fighting where we're trying to knock someone down or show your power or your knowledge or your way. The kind of fighting that fights for faith, where we fight for people. Fighting that means we take hold of faith and we won't let go. Fighting that means we beat down these distractions and we take hold of the eternity on offer to us from God. Fighting that means we're disciplined and we're trained, that we live life without the muck that so many leaders seem to wade through, that there's no skeletons in our cupboard, there's nothing under our rug. A life where we've disciplined our thought life, we've examined our motives, and we've looked to Jesus, and we've asked him to be our navigator, our trainer. Timothy's encouraged to fight this in prayer. Bring the needs of individuals he knows, the community that he oversees, the leaders he meets, the news around him, and the family he loves. How can we fight in prayer? When's when's a good time for me to pray in the daytime when I'm not going to get distracted and not going to get interrupted? What are the best ways for me to pray? Is it with structure? Is it a list? Is it free? I want to be able to say to God on the day that I stand face to face with Him that I did fight alongside Him in prayer for the world around me. Timothy trains himself in prayer, but also through study. He surrounds himself with the scriptures that are available to him. His training is to make himself mentally and spiritually healthy. And to do that, he opens himself up to the possibility that the way he thinks about things might have elements that need to change. I've got to make sure that when I'm reading the Bible, I'm fighting with a mind that's humble and open to change, open to question. To question what I currently think. So I'm ready to refocus my attention. I need to hear other people's opinions, not just find people whose opinions agree with what I've already convinced myself the Bible says. So many times that the Bible has told me off. It's told me new things, it's encouraged me, it's redirected me, it's answered my questions, it's given me wisdom. I need to train myself by fighting in a place of humility. The moment I think I've got it all figured out, I close myself off from that teachable spirit that good fighters all need. Timothy fought for God's kingdom to be made real by his actions. He practically lived out a different way of being. He gave help to people around him. It wasn't enough that he could just see the things that were wrong and pray about them. He was an activist. Over his lifetime, Timothy would champion the cause of those who had nothing. He would make sure that his world was not solely surrounded by wealthy, important people or those who shared his new faith worldview. No. He made sure he spent time with all kinds of people. I don't want to get to the end of my days, and there were people on my doorstep who needed help. I had the power to do something about it with my words or my actions or my resources, maybe, my networks. And I did what? I did nothing? How is that fighting the good fight? How is that me wrestling with the powers of darkness and evil? All it takes for evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing. So may we mirror Timothy, Paul, and Jesus in the way that we fight this good fight of faith. May we do it through prayer, through study, through humility, and through action. May we find deep down inside us something bubbling up where we know that we're fighting alongside God for faith, for hope, for people, and for love. Train us, God. Show us what to fight for. Help us to do it in ways that help the world and bring about your kingdom here, just like it is in heaven.